Welcome to the Everyday Ministry Podcast, where ministers get together to discuss everyday ministry.
This is James, and I decided to interview Lamar Duke, and he's going to introduce himself here in a second. But it's a great man that I've got to meet through church planting in Alabama. So, Lamar, if you would, introduce yourself.
Well, it's good to talk with you, James. I'm really been looking forward to this, and I'm honored to be. I am Lamar Duke. I am the lead church planting strategist with the Alabama State Board of Missions, and what that means is that I'm the champion of church planting throughout the state of Alabama. I'm married to my wife, Dolly. We've been married for 47 years. We've lived in 6 states and moved 16 times. That just means she deserves a sympathy card for all those moves. But and I have 6 grandchildren, two children, 6 grandchildren, and 2 great-grands. And my current ministry is that I lead church planting for Alabama Baptists, and the area that I really have worked hard the last 4.5, 5 years since I've been here in Alabama is building systems for assessment, training, and coaching of planters throughout the state. We've been privileged to plant about 72 churches throughout the state of Alabama and sent 20 men to other states to plant churches. I was a pastor of established churches for 25 years. Then the last 6.5 years, I was pastor of a new church plant outside of Savannah, Georgia. And after that, I was director of missions in Pittsburgh, where we planted 24 churches in 6 years. And then I went to New York to be state director of missions, where we planted 57 churches in 5 years. Now I've been in Alabama almost 5 years. So we're excited about what God is allowing us to do. I met you, James, of course, when your church was planted by another planter, but you've stepped into that role, and we've worked with you, and it's been a joy to get to know you. And I hope that tells you a little bit about me anyway.
Man, I think that tells us a lot about you. You've done a little bit of everything and been a little bit of everywhere. Where was the church plant outside of Savannah? I don't guess I knew about that one.
I planted a church in South Effingham County, near where they build Gulfstream airplanes.
Okay.
But 23,000 people had moved in there at that time. Now 56,000 people live in that area.
Oh, wow.
But they had moved in there to build airplanes, and I moved out there to plant a church to reach those people that were outside the norm of that community, and we had a great time. In 6 years, we saw over 300 people worshiping with us, and we owned 47 acres and built a building that looked like a Walmart, and they called us a Walmart church, but that's all right.
That's all right. So when you lived out there, did y'all ever go to Tybee Island?
Oh, absolutely. I know all about Tybee Island. Yeah, it was about 18 miles from our house, but we went out there regularly. Yeah.
That's my favorite beach.
Yeah.
Me and my wife love to go there. We don't get to go much because we don't live 18 miles away, but we love going. All right, well, we'll get into it. I know you're a busy man, so right. I did want to say this before we jump into it. You're talking about the process that you've helped develop, and I guess we'll probably talk about it in a minute. That's what I had to go through, and I loved it. I think the basic series, is that what you're still calling it? Church planning
Alabama
basics.
Church planning basics. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know it's really geared towards church planning, but pretty much everything that you cover would be great for anybody that pastors a church.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Loved it.
I agree. And we found the same things that start a healthy church will also grow and lead a healthy church. So they're very similar. I don't think there ought to be so much of a line of demarcation between the two, planning and pastoring. They ought to be. People need to understand that they're the same game.
That's right.
Same ministry. That's right.
That's right. Well, the first question I always ask people when they come on here, and I love this question because I get a different answer every time. But if you could define what an everyday ministry is, what would you call it?
I would say that's a man or woman who gets up every morning with the determined set goal in their mind and their heart, and do everything in their power to cooperate with God to write redemptive history over the 21st century, and particularly over this day. I mean, my day to day has not been like I had planned. It's had a lot of things that came in my path, but because of those interruptions, I had the opportunity to meet a lady who just gave her life to Christ this morning by somebody else sharing the gospel, and I was one of the first people that she met with after she accepted Christ. And I told her, we got the same daddy, so we must be brother and sister. And we had a great fellowship together. And I just get up every day looking for where God is at work and try to join Him and cooperate with Him in everything that I do. I think that's an everyday ministry, isn't it?
Man, I agree right there with you. And that's why I like this question, because I guess when most people think of a minister, they're thinking of that pastor, youth pastor, or in this case, a church planter or music pastor, whatever it may be. But it's everyone. It's not just those that are in vocational ministry. It's every one of us that follow after Christ.
Absolutely.
And
everybody that knows
realizes
Christ
they're not, it's that woman you met this morning. So,
right.
I mean, I love your answer. A lot more educated than I think I could put together. So encouraged by it. Well, the first question I wanted to ask you, and it's probably not the first time you've ever been asked this question, is why plant more churches in Alabama?
Well, it is a question that's often verbalized to me, and it's also a question that I think a lot of people maybe don't have courage to articulate it to me, but they're thinking that way a lot of times. But in a state that has almost 3,300 Alabama Baptist churches, and we have almost 5 million people living in this state, the question is always in front of people's mind: why more churches? Why don't we have enough churches? We just need to grow those churches, and there's a sense in which if all those churches were full, that'd be one thing. But here's the deal: there's 2 million plus people in the state of Alabama don't go to anybody's church.
Right.
Did you let that sink in? Almost half the people in the state of Alabama don't go to anybody's church, not of any denomination, of any description. So that tells me that the system we now have is perfect for the results we're now getting. However, it's not perfect for those that aren't coming. I mean, so how are we going to reach those people that are outside the protection of God's grace by not knowing Him as personal Savior? We have to figure out how to do that. We need a system of alteration, if you please. We need a system that reaches the people that are not being reached now. And one of the parts of that system, I believe, is new churches, because new churches, the first year of life, they baptize 10.7 people per 100 members, whereas the average Southern Baptist church baptizes about 2.3 per 100 members. So it seems to me that church plants do a pretty good job of evangelizing and reaching new people that maybe the established churches, the systems are great for the ones that they have coming, but it's not great for the results outside that.
That's right. I got to email you about it this week. We had a guy visit our church for the first time he's ever been in church this past Sunday. And for me personally, that made it more realistic than ever before. But one thing I remember when I went through the church basics, and you might be able to remember the website off the top of your head. I actually was looking at it a few weeks ago, but I couldn't find it again today to talk about it. But it gives us the stats of the different areas and counties and cities in Alabama of the unchurched. Do you remember the name of that website?
plantalabama.org.
Yes.
You go there, and then in the questions down there for considering planning or currently planning or looking to partner, there's a question: where should I plant? If you click there, it'll take you to impactalabama.net, which is another website that has that map of Alabama, and it has a little tagline, a little flag for each of the top 100 places in Alabama where we need a church plant. If you click on that, it'll give you a 2-page demographic of why we need a church in that particular location. And there's also a lot of other information on that website, like a mission digest. You can actually enter your zip code, find out who lives in your zip code, and that sort of thing. You can access it through plantalabama.org, or you can access it directly. It's impactalabama.net.
We'll put both of those in the show notes, so if you want to look at them, you can click right on them. I was actually looking at it in preparation of a sermon a few weeks back, and I looked at, our state, and then I dropped it down to our district, and then our county, and then our city, and all of them were 60% unchurched or higher.
I think my 2 million is probably very conservative for the state of Alabama. It's probably a lot higher than that, but I'm trying to be realistic with that. But you're right. 60% are unchurched, and it's a scary thought. In the buckle of the Bible Belt, it's 60% unchurched.
That's right. And I don't remember where it was, but most people don't go to church because they're never asked. I forgot who came out with that statistic. I think it was
Lifeway. Lifeway recently did a survey, said 80% of the people who do not ever go to church said that if a friend or relative invited them, they would come. And if you invite them twice, that number goes up to 90% would come. So you just have to keep on inviting them, but that's pretty amazing. So it tells me the reason they're not coming is because we're not inviting. We got the best secret in the world, but we're keeping it a secret.
That's right. Well, let's get off that rabbit trail, and if you would just briefly tell us about the process that y'all go through in planting churches in Alabama.
Well, again, if you go to that website, plantalabama.org, and if you look in there under the menu, there's a place you can click here, and it says start here, and on that there's 10 steps that we encourage people to go through, and that's the application and assessment part of the first step, and the application process helps you get ready for an assessment retreat. We have, I think you went through a interview, but we've stepped that up now to a 2-day retreat. We're going to have one September 11 and 12, and we have 6 couples hopefully going to be ready to go through that and be assessed. And we'll have probably 15 or so assessors in the room, and we'll go through a lot of things. They will share their vision, their call to ministry, their sermon they'll preach, and a lot of other things that you didn't have to go through because you went through on the interview process. But now we do all of this preparatory work, and then we take them through this assessment. And I say that the assessment actually asks the question, why? Why you? Why planning? Why here? Why now? Why with this group of people? Why? And because you've been a pastor long enough to know now that on Monday morning, the only thing that keeps you there sometimes is the call of God. It can't be, you go to a place maybe because the need is great, but you stay there because the call of God is there. So what we're getting at here is this person ready to take on the rigors of what it takes to plant a church? That's the first part, the why, the assessment and application part. And then the second part is the training. You went through Alabama Church Planting Basics. It's a 3-day drinking from a fire hydrant. You learn, it's the what. It's what would I do if I go plant a church? It's basically 15 different sessions that tell a pastor or planter what you ought to do on a regular basis. And I think you've already attested in this podcast to the fact that that's been very helpful for you as a pastor pastoring Lighthouse Church to do that. And then the third piece of that is now we've added a year-long coaching to that. once a month, 4 hours each month, and we coach these guys after the basic training. And somebody described it as the basics is like unloading box after box after box from a moving van, and the coaching is taking one box at a time and helping that planner unpack that box and figure out the how, because we get the why in the assessment, we get the what in the training, and then we get the how in the coaching. And that's where it comes. That's really our process. It's 3 parts, and that's what we're trying to build, because Ed Stetzer several years ago said that he did a study, and he out of that study, he said if a planner is assessed well, trained well, and coached well, he has an 85% success rate. And that's why I put all my eggs in these 3 baskets. So we're trying to make sure. And by the way, in Alabama, we've actually started a few more than 72 churches, but the 72 are the ones that succeeded. We have a 90% success rate in Alabama of people who go through our process are successful in planting a church. And that's pretty good.
Yeah, that is on the national average, that's extremely high in comparison. I interviewed a guy that I believe it was Indianapolis where he planted a church, and it didn't last. And the biggest thing he contributed to was, well, one was pride, but the second one was the fact that he went in there by himself. Yeah. And
we say to our planners, as you know, we say to our planners, do not embark upon this alone. Mm-hmm. We want to put people around them to help them be successful.
Well, not just for church planners in Alabama, but just for church planners in general. You've, like you said earlier, you've planted in Georgia, and you've been all over the U.S. pretty much. What's one simple advice or a few that you would give to someone that is seeking to plant a church?
Well, I probably would go back and reiterate 2 things. I don't go unless you're called of God to go, because if you're not called of God, you're not gonna be able to stay, because the devil is not happy when we start planting churches to reach people. We don't plant churches in Alabama to swap sheep. We plant churches to impact the lostness of society around us. And when you get after that and get serious about it, Satan hates that, and he's going to come at you with everything he can. So a call of God is the first necessity. And the second thing, if I could make it a 2-part answer, the second part of it is don't go alone. You need a mentor. You need a group of people that'll go along with you and help you during that. I would say to a planner, don't go alone, and don't go unless you're called of God.
Man, great stuff right there. I know what it's like to be alone for a while, and there's something about having a group of people encouraging you and being there with you. All right. Well, a different part of that question is maybe there's someone that's listening and they're in the same city where a church plant is moving in or just moved in. What would you say to that pastor of that already established church in that area?
Do not fear church planners for taking your turf or taking people from your church, because the planners that we train are not after your church members. They're after penetrating those people who do not even darken the door of the church or don't even have church on their radar. And we want to reach them, like the man that came to your church on Sunday. I don't know if you noticed, but after you sent me that, I tweeted about it and wrote on Facebook about it, bragging on you and what you're doing, because when you reach people who've never been to church. By the way, I didn't know there was anybody in Vernon, Alabama that had never been to church, but that was exciting.
Shocked. I was shocked.
That was exciting to me, and so that was a great illustration of what we teach is that we're not a threat to the churches in the community. We are an extension of those churches, trying to reach people that, like I said, the systems we're now using are perfect for the results we're now getting. So we're not discounting that, but we are starting systems to reach a set of people that maybe are underserved or not being reached at this time.
Great nuggets of wisdom there. You know, the first question I asked outside of what an everyday minister is was why plant more churches in Alabama. And I made the statement that I know you probably get that question a lot, or like you said, maybe there's someone they want to ask you that, but they never do. And I think a lot of that comes to the fact that some people, you know, just don't understand, but there are some out there that oppose church planting. They're against it. So what would be an encouragement that you would say to them? I know sometimes you would want to say something a little less encouraging to some people, but how would you encourage that individual?
Well, most times when people come to me with something opposing church planting, they are defending revitalization of an existing church. And they're saying, why don't you spend your time rebuilding, retooling, revitalizing a church rather than starting a new one? Well, the truth of the matter is, I believe both are necessary. Dr. Lance, our executive director here at the Alabama Baptist State Board of Missions, says that church planting and revitalization are the two wings of the same plane, and we have to have both of them. I am a trained coach with a team of people here in our building that work with revitalizing churches. Our coaching training that we do after the basic training, we've coached 175 men since 2014 in those coaching networks all across the state of Alabama. 58% of them are planners. The others are pastoring a church that they desire to know how to take it to another level of health. And we're trying to help both these. It's not a one or the other. It's not, I'm not an evangelist for church planting only. I'm an evangelist of Christ Jesus being King, and therefore I'm involved in church planting. I'm also involved in revitalization, and really I try to speak twice about revitalizing churches before I ever bring up the idea of church planting. I'm kind of known because my role here is as being a church planting guy, and that's fine. But I just want, there's there doesn't have to be enmity between the two. Does that make sense? And so that's and I would say in the state of Alabama, the Myers-Mallory State Missions Offering that's coming up with a week of prayer, September 10 through 17. Is a great opportunity for folks to get behind church planting, because we're one of the 5 ministry emphases that get supported through the Myers-Mallory State Missions Offering. A lot of people want to know, well, how can I promote missions here in Alabama? Well, that's one of the ways you can do it. And of course, the cooperative program is always there, and that's a great way. The Myers-Mallory is not in competition with the cooperative program. It's a complement to it, but it helps people have a targeted emphasis upon the state of Alabama. And there's a lot of material accessible at myersmallory.com, which is our office's website for that particular offering and week of prayer.
It's actually a good segue to really the last question I want to ask you is, how can someone at an established church help with the State Board of Missions, or help go alongside with church planting in Alabama?
Well,
I know you just gave those two examples.
The cooperative program and Myers-Mallory State Missions Offering are two good ways. Continual prayer. We have a program or ministry initiative that I've started called Adopt a Planner. And if they will email me or email you, you can get in touch with me, and we'll help them get plugged into a top 10 list of church planners that they can partner with, and simply adopt them and pray for them, and send maybe a couple up there to visit with that church planner and encourage them and collect prayer requests, and come back home and church pray for them. There's just a lot of ways you can do that. You don't have to have all the money, all the personnel, and all the know-how to church plant to adopt a planner and simply encourage them and pray for them. That's one of the best things you can do, because I've been a church planner, and it's a lonely job sometimes. You feel like you're in the R&D department of church life, and you're out there all by yourself, and nobody else understands what you do, and it can get lonely, and you need that encouragement. And that's one of the ways I would. And of course, if they want to do more, there's always more. There's sending church, sponsor church, supporting church. There's lots of things we can hook you up with to do that. But those are some basic things that I would recommend to a church to consider.
Obviously, you got a lot more wisdom on this area than me. The one thing I would recommend, because it's free and it's simple to do, and it's one reason I recommend it is when I went to the basics class with y'all, one of the biggest things that I come home with was that you encourage each church planner to have at least 100 people praying for them in the church as they get started.
Absolutely. I can't imagine doing it without that. I really can't. That's right. And we even gave you some material in the back of that chapter to know how to write the invite emails or letters to people that you want to invite to be your prayer team. I still use some of that. I still have a prayer team that supports me in what I do today. And I'm not planning a church. I'm leading the church planning effort. But I still have a prayer team that supports me, and I keep them updated on what we're doing. And I think that's very important. I don't think we do anything worthwhile without prayer support.
That's right. And so, maybe you're at a church that can't do more than that. Like he said, go to the adoptive planner and visit them and pray for them and just encourage them, because it is a lonely thing. Well, the way we always end the podcast is a plug of the week. So you got any kind of recommendations for anybody out there at church planning, or would just want to know more about it?
Well, I would certainly recommend our website, plantalabama.org, and I would encourage you to go there. There's a lot of information on there, and there's lots of ways to just click on those questions on the various places along there, and then of course follow me on Twitter, Facebook, email, whatever. There's lots of ways you can do that, and I'm sure you can already put that out for us on there, how to do that. I also wanted to make an offer just for this podcast, James. I wanted to make it available. If anyone would like it, if they'll notify you and you send me a list of the people that want it, we will give them a book. It's called Kingdom First, Starting Churches That Shape Movements. It's written by Jeff Christopherson, who is the Vice President of North American Mission Board currently, and he was a planner in Toronto, Canada, and other places where I've known him. And Jeff's a friend of mine. This book, we have several of these, couple of boxes of them, and I'll be glad to give them to the first 50 people who respond. And that'll just be a gift from our office to them. We really, and there's some good stuff in there if they'd like to read about church planning and delve into it a little bit deeper.
Awesome. We really appreciate that at the podcast. And so listeners, it's a free book. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I try to read a book at least once or twice a week. And so, hey, send me the information, message me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or one of the other two co-hosts, and we'll get that information to them and get the book to you. I appreciate that so much, Lamar. And before we get off of here, is there anything you want to say to finish it up?
I just thank you for the opportunity to be on this podcast, and I look forward to the responses of people, and let's just live in such a way every day that I should have said this in the everyday minister category when you asked me about that, but I live every day to increase the population of heaven and decrease the population of hell. And I would just encourage all of our listeners to do the same. And look forward to what heaven's going to look like, because we've been faithful as everyday ministers.
Awesome. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
If you're encouraged by what you hear, please go like our Facebook page, share the episodes, and rate the podcast on iTunes. Don't forget that a new episode drops every first and third Mondays. Our prayer is that these episodes are an encouragement to you and that you would be faithful in the ministry that God has placed you in.